It was just another Tuesday when it started. Nothing special, just the usual grind. But that night something shifted. I remember waking up with a jolt, heart pounding against my ribs like a trapped bird. The digital clock on my bedside table glowed a stark red. 3 a.m. Exactly. I sat up listening. The house was silent, but it was a heavy, watchful silence. I figured it was just a bad dream, shook it off, and forced myself back to sleep. The next night, it happened again. 3 a.m. My eyes snapped open as if on command. This time I heard something. A faint, rhythmic sound from downstairs. A soft thud, pause, thud, pause. It sounded like someone was gently tapping on the floorboards in the living room. My blood ran cold. I live alone. I grabbed the heaviest book I could find and crept to the top of the stairs. Peeking down into the darkness, I saw nothing. The sound had stopped. The silence was back, even more unsettling than before. I spent the rest of the night huddled in my bed, lights on, listening to every creak and groan of the old house. By the third night, I was a wreck. I hadn't slept properly, I was jumpy, and I was starting to think I was losing my mind. I decided to stay awake. I armed myself with a giant mug of coffee and a baseball bat, and I sat on the living room couch, determined to face whatever this was. As the minutes ticked closer to 3, the air grew thick and cold. I could see my breath misting in front of me. Then, at 2:59 a.m., it began. Thud, pause, thud, pause. It was coming from right under my feet, beneath the floorboards. My heart was a drum solo in my chest. I froze, too scared to move, too scared to even breathe. The tapping continued, steady and relentless. It wasn't aggressive, but it was insistent. It felt like it was trying to tell me something. Gathering every last ounce of courage, I knelt down and pressed my ear to the wooden floor. The sound was clearer now, more distinct. It wasn't just a random thud, it was a pattern, a code. It sounded like Morse code. I fumbled for my phone, my hands shaking so badly I could barely type. I pulled up a Morse code chart. Dot dash dot dash dot. Dash 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 dot. SOS over and over again. An SOS signal coming from beneath my living room floor. My rational mind was screaming at me to call the police, to run, to do anything but stay in that house. But another part of me, a morbidly curious part, needed to know what was down there. This house was built in the 1920s. The realtor had mentioned a small sealed-off cellar, but said it was just for structural support, inaccessible. Clearly, that wasn't the whole story. The next day, fueled by a mixture of terror and determination, I rented a crowbar and a heavy-duty flashlight. I knew where the tapping was coming from, an old, worn section of the floor, partially hidden by a rug. That evening, I waited. I didn't want to start pulling my house apart in broad daylight. As dusk settled, I put on some work gloves, took a deep breath, and got to work. Prying up the first floorboard was the hardest. The old wood groaned in protest, but once I got one up, the rest came a little easier. Beneath the floorboards was just dirt and support beams. But in the center, exactly where I'd heard the tapping, I saw it. The faint outline of a wooden trapdoor covered in decades of dust and grime. It had a rusty iron ring for a handle. My hands trembled as I cleared the dirt away and pulled on the ring. It wouldn't budge. It was either rusted shut or locked from the other side, a thought that made my stomach churn. I wedged the crowbar into the seam and put all my weight into it. With a deafening crack, the wood splintered and the trapdoor creaked open. A weave of musty, cold air washed over me, smelling of damp earth and something else, something old and metallic. I shone my flashlight down into the darkness. It revealed a short, rickety ladder leading down into a small, brick-lined space, a cellar. I hesitated for a long moment, my mind racing with all the horror movies I'd ever seen. But the tapping had stopped. The silence was an invitation. I had to know what was sending that SOS. I climbed down the ladder, my flashlight beam cutting through the gloom. The cellar was tiny, barely big enough to stand up in. The walls were damp and the air was freezing. And in the corner, half buried in the dirt floor, was a small metal box. It looked like an old military footlocker. It was rusted and dented, but there was a small, intricate mechanism on the side. As I got closer, I saw that the mechanism was a series of gears and levers connected to a small hammer. It was a clockwork device. The hammer was positioned right under the spot where the floorboards would be. This was the source of the tapping. I ran my fingers over the box, trying to find a latch or a lock. On the top, etched into the metal, were a name and a date. Walter Jennings, 1943, and below it, the words "Time will tell." It seemed to be a time capsule, but why the SOS? And why did it start now? I noticed a small dial on the side, near the clockwork mechanism. It was set to a specific date and time. My date and time. It seemed the mechanism was designed to activate after a certain number of years, maybe as a fail-safe to ensure it was found. The SOS was a clever, if terrifying, way to get attention. I managed to pry open the rusted latches. Inside, cushioned by faded velvet, was not treasure or secret documents. It was a collection of personal items. A stack of letters tied with a ribbon, a faded photograph of a young man in a soldier's uniform, a woman's silver locket, and a small leather-bound journal. I sat there on the cold dirt floor of the hidden cellar, and I started to read. The journal belonged to Walter Jennings. He was a soldier in World War II who lived in this house. He wrote about his love for a woman named Eleanor, about his fear of going to war, and about his hope for the future. He built this time capsule before he was deployed, filling it with his most precious memories. The clockwork tapper was his invention, a guarantee that his story wouldn't be lost to time forever, a final message from the past. The last entry was heartbreaking. He wrote that if he didn't return from the war, he hoped that whoever found this box would find Eleanor and give her the locket. He had sealed the cellar himself, hoping to return and open it with her one day. A quick search online told me the tragic end to the story. Walter Jennings was declared missing in action in 1944. He never came home. The SOS wasn't a cry for help from a ghost trapped in my cellar. It was an echo, a message in a bottle sent across 80 years, powered by clockwork and a love that refused to be forgotten. The house wasn't haunted. It was just holding a memory, waiting for someone to listen. I managed to track down Eleanor's family through an ancestry website. She had passed away a few years ago, but I met with her granddaughter. I gave her the box, the letters, and the locket. Seeing the tears in her eyes as she held a piece of her family's history, I knew I'd done the right thing. I don't get woken up at 3 a.m. anymore.